I'm smiling, I'm having a beer, chatting with the guys. A minute later, I went down. Not everyone makes it, right? And my odds of surviving, I was full stop almost 10 minutes. My odds of being here physically, mentally okay today are less than 1%.
You're listening to Bigger Than Belief, real stories about real faith with real people whose belief is unbelievable. I'm your host, Adam Duxter. Thanks for listening to Bigger Than Belief. Today is Thursday, July 30th. As always, I'm your host, Adam Duxter, coming to you from our podcast studio on the second floor of the WCCO TV studios in downtown Minneapolis. Been a super fun July hanging out with you guys. This is seriously one of my favorite months that we've had for this show since we've started, simply because we've had such a wide variety of awesome perspectives, awesome stories. I really enjoyed our interviews we did with Casey, with Deventry, with Jesse last week. All of them were super fun with Nick at the start of the month. And super special thank you to our folks with Amplify. If you remember way back when we did the interview with Amplify and Andrea McMaster, who works with the nonprofits across the Twin Cities, she was really instrumental in forging all of those connections with our guests really over the course of this past month, and we enjoyed them. Hopefully you enjoyed the stories that they had to share. Those are all people who have been impacted or have impacted Amplify in one way, shape, or form. So it was super fun to spend July with them. If you haven't yet, go back, take a look at those episodes through our catalog. And today I want to shout out our YouTube viewers. If you're watching on YouTube today, you see me wearing the sport coat in the collared shirt. As always, don't forget you can watch all our episodes on YouTube simply by searching up the WCCO YouTube page and going under our podcast tab for that, finding us on Bigger Than Belief there. Today, we're going to take a bit of a turn. As far as the guests we've had awesome people leading nonprofits and organizations. But today I'm going to do something that I've never done before, which is interview someone who has died. Pausing here to pull out his book. Yeah, you heard that right. Interviewing someone who has died and come back to life, got a second chance at life. Holding up his book now, Dying to Be the World's Best. Sig Muller, who born and raised right here in the Twin Cities, worked for a bunch of Twin Cities-based companies for a number of years, but it was almost 2 years ago to the day, August 2024, Sig was celebrating a beautiful Twin City summer day. Gone for a round of golf with some friends earlier in the day, was about to do a fantasy football draft. Maybe you're prepping for yours, and was at a backyard barbecue with a number of friends when he suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. It was lights on, lights off, just like that. His Sig's heart actually stopped. He was medically dead for almost 10 minutes, which is crazy because the odds of not just surviving that, but making a full recovery are insanely low. I think he gave me like a 1% odds was what doctors told him after the fact that he had of surviving and making that full recovery. But thanks to the quick actions of some friends that were at that party who immediately gave him CPR, and then some really great care right here in the Twin Cities, Sig was able to make that full recovery, and he's alive and thriving to this day. Now, Sig's book, Dying to Be the World's Best, comes from his recovery. It is a renewed sense of purpose, and it is a second chance at life, trying to figure out exactly why he's still here. And he says he figured that out real quick. It's to encourage other people to be the best versions of themselves and to really make a difference with the time that they do have left. Sig's story is so cool, and we're going to get into it. But I think it just reminds us all that no day is given, and that we make these big plans for our futures. We make these big plans for what's next. We stress about what's going to happen a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, where are we going to be? And it really could end at any time. We really don't know what portion of life we have guaranteed. or what day we have left. Sig is a great reminder of making every day count. And I think that you all are really going to resonate with his story. Hey, if you haven't yet, I say this every week, please follow along with us. If this is your first time listening to Bigger Than Belief, I'll keep it simple. Here's what we do. We share real stories about real people and the real faith that they share. Every single week. Every Thursday, we put out new episodes wherever you get podcasts. If this is the first one you've ever seen, please, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, that you're listening to this on, subscribe or follow so you never miss an episode. And then if you've been a listener for a while, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. Like 100, some of you have done that, especially in Apple Podcasts, which is where the majority of our people listen. Man, I can't tell you how much of a difference that makes for us. And a super special shout out to everyone who has left a review on this podcast. Again, that makes such a massive difference. We got one recently that I thought was really special, and I really liked it. Shout out to As Hutch Mom, who said, "A friend recommended the show. I'm so glad she did. It opened my eyes to the broader faith community in Minnesota beyond my own church. I have a young adult daughter returning from the mission field, and this podcast has provided some valuable resources for possible next steps back home." Man, that's so awesome. We're so glad that you've been listening to the show or took some time to listen to the show. For all of you who do tune in week after week or are just checking this out, I can't explain how much I appreciate you, how much Heidi, our producer, appreciates you, how much we all on this team appreciate you listening. So again, 5-star rating, follow us so you never miss an episode. We've got some really cool stuff that we're working on, including hopefully potentially a tie-in to the Minnesota State Fair coming up here in about a month or so. Folks, Sig's story is so awesome. Dying to be the world's best. He literally did it. He died so that he can come back and be even better. What a remarkable story. And I'm really encouraged to share how Sig's faith was shaped along the way. I don't want to waste any more time. Here is Sig Muller. Well, we're now joined by a very special guest, someone who I've been excited to talk to for some time, and he's been very gracious. We've been in contact for months, but we've slowly, just for purposes of scheduling, been moving this conversation back. But I'm excited. Now, today, we are sitting down together. I'm with Sig Muller. Sig, you are a speaker. You've coached, you're a father. But what's so cool about your story is you are one of the first people I've ever met who's died.
Yeah. That'll change your attitude for sure. It was my own personal heart-stopping moment. We all have them. Mine literally involved my heart stopping for almost 10 minutes. You know, a little ride in an ambulance, an implantable cardio defibrillator, an automated external defibrillator, restarting my heart. So it's quite the story, and I'm sure we'll dig into the details.
It is so wild. I mean, it's a second chance in every sense of the phrase, right?
Yeah.
But for people who've never met you and have never heard your story, it was just about 2 years ago. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary, right?
Yep.
August 2024. What do you remember about the day, essentially, that you died?
Yeah. So didn't plan to die that day. I was with some guys I worked with at General Mills from the 90s. And we had an annual golf event that we did. I call them the Baker Boys. And we were out at a golf course just west of Lake Minnetonka here in the Twin Cities and catching up. 12 of us. Back in the mid-90s, we started half-day Fridays at General Mills. So we'd golf at Baker Park, hence the Baker Boys. And this group had stayed together that whole time. And most of the guys are semi-retired or retired. About half live out of town. So it's just a normal day. We had the golf tournament, 3 days of golf, and there's actually a trophy, you know, modeled after the Ryder Cup that the winner gets. And we have our fantasy football draft with that group. So that was my plan for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Catching up before golf. The guys out of town I don't see very often. So we're just catching up like normal guys. Hey, what's up with your kids? Well, they're out of college. They got their first job. I just moved, you know, I had a vacation here. Normal stuff guys talk about before golf. And they said to me, Sig, what's up? And what's new with you? And I said, well, you remember, guys, when I left General Mills, I went to this company called Survival Inc.
Mm-hmm.
They just had a 25, 30-year reunion 2 weeks ago, and we celebrated all the lives we've saved. Survival Inc. was the pioneer of automated external defibrillators.
AED. Yeah.
AEDs, yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought nothing of it at the time. I was just kind of sharing, hey, this connected to, my General Mills experience and you guys. And they said, oh, yeah, sure, we remember that. And I said, yeah, it was just really cool. We're chest bumping, high-fiving, celebrating how important it is to help save lives and to step into the breach, right? I didn't know I was talking about something that, 6 hours later, I would need a prescription that would save my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 6 hours later, what happens?
Yeah, well, so I golfed, I'm a crappy golfer, but I have a lot of fun, and it is handicapped. I think I should have a higher handicap than the guys give me, but decided, as though I had a choice, the golf course would be a bad place to have a cardiac arrest. So I waited till we were over in sort of the Mendota Heights area at a buddy's house, Paul, and that's where I had my sudden cardiac arrest, outdoors at a back patio at a barbecue, closer to Regents Hospital where I would wind up. That's where I went down. And cardiac arrest, just for people, people talk about heart attacks, cardiac arrest. I think a lot of times use them interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
Cardiac arrest is an electrical problem. It's what happened to, if you're a football fan, Damar Hamlin. Got popped in the chest, electrical interruption, heart stops. A heart attack is a plumbing problem.
Mm-hmm.
My plumbing is good, but I had an electrical malfunction that day. And there's actually a picture that I share when I speak and talk about this that has me sitting at this outdoor bar, taking a minute before my cardiac arrest.
Wow.
And I look great. I'm smiling. I'm having a beer, chatting with the guys. A minute later, I went down, and Paul came around and caught me as I collapsed to the ground.
There is no sort of pre-warning or anything.
No. One of the guys, and I actually he wrote a blog about this. He said, Sig, I kind of noticed that you didn't look yourself. Your eyes got real big, like they were going to bulge out of your head. And I asked if you were okay, and you didn't say anything back. And that's when Paul then got up and came around and caught me as I went down.
How much of that exact moment do you remember?
0. I don't think I remember, probably 3, 4, 5 minutes before. So something was happening. I don't think it was visible till sort of the last minute to others, and I wasn't aware of it.
Wow. And so when you say you go down and you have this sudden cardiac arrest, I mean, your heart goes from beating to not beating.
Yeah, it's really chaos is what happens in the heart. The rhythm I had was called ventricular tachycardia. So imagine, we all sort of know the heartbeat that goes, to the typical EKG, right? PQRST, if you're a doctor and a cardiologist. It goes from that rhythm, in my case, to ventricular tachycardia, which is a chaotic, unorganized rhythm. Imagine you had a bowl of Jell-O, and we're shaking that bowl of Jell-O, and it just started randomly quivering. That's what your heart does.
Wow.
And at that point, when it's quivering like that, blood doesn't pump through your body.
Wow.
So it's not beating in any organized rhythm. It's like that bowl of Jell-O just quivering in no organized rhythm, and 0 blood then pumps through your body.
How many people are around you at this point?
Gosh, there were probably 10 to 12 of us there, plus spouses, significant others at that point. And we were, spread throughout the house. There were probably, I suppose, 10 of us outside at the pool, at the bar, hanging out there. Yeah.
And so you said your friend essentially caught you.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they sprang into action, right?
People did. The whole team did. One person got on the phone with 911 right away. One person ran around to the front of the house, waited there. Another person ran down the block, about 2 blocks, to make sure the ambulance would turn on the right road. The person out front was there to say, hey, come with me around the house. Paul, when he laid me on the ground, his wife joined him, and Paul and Kim gave me the CPR. I learned about later what's called agonal breathing. And what's interesting, I do a lot of advocacy work now to help with, take CPR, learn CPR. Let's do anything we can to help people survive cardiac arrest, defibrillators in the community, things like that. And what I didn't know at the time was anything about agonal breathing. And it's almost never talked about. So agonal breathing is a brainstem reflex where you look like you're gasping for air. And so bystanders can look and think maybe you're still breathing. One of my buddies jokingly afterward said, you know what? We were watching you and we're on with 911 and saying, that's Sig, man. He's a fighter. Look at him go. He's still trying to breathe. No, no, you're not taking in any breathing with any air with agonal breathing. So thank goodness they realized that, and the 911 coached him through. They began CPR. Paul, who was kind of our informal leader of the Baker boys, he's the one that kind of keeps us together over the years. Paul had always shared with people, and you look back on this, and I have a lot of moments I call God incidences, guardian angel moments. And at the time, it's just life. Life flows through, and we often don't pause to recognize them when they're happening. But looking back, it's pretty amazing to see how God was working, and you didn't know it at the time. So Paul, going back to the mid-90s, as we became friends with our group, he was the guy, and this is a direct quote, and he lived this. He would say, hey, brother, I love you. I'd give you a lung. I probably heard that from him hundreds of times over the 30-plus years I knew Paul. And he wound up being the mouth-to-mouth on me, literally, giving me a lung. His wife was about 105 pounds, 110 pounds, soaking wet, gave me the chest compressions, and broke 3 ribs. And I'm like, way to go, Kim. I'm still here. You did it right. Later. They hurt for about 8 weeks when I'd breathe.
Wow.
But if you're doing it right, you're pumping it pretty hard. And one of the fun stories about it, again, all of this comes to me later as people, fill in the blanks. You learn songs when you do CPR training. I don't know, Adam, if you remember any specific songs.
Bee Gees.
The Bee Gees, Staying Alive.
Yeah.
Staying Alive. So Kim sang that while pumping my chest out loud. So here's, what a horrible situation. This guy just died in front of, his best friends. And here's Kim singing, whether you're a brother, whether you're a mother, you're staying alive, staying alive. And I love that optimism.
Yeah.
Right? In what's just a horrible situation. Now they teach people Baby Shark. I don't know if you know Baby Shark.
Yeah.
Baby Shark wasn't a thing when I had my kids, but it's the same rhythm. And the important thing is you're pumping that chest 100 to 120 beats per minute. And that's the right rhythm. So that's why they have you sing the songs. I had a buddy that I worked with at Survival Link that I saw after my cardiac arrest. He had been an EMT driver before he joined us at Survival Link and helped with AED education nationally. And he said, Sig, I got to tell you, when we were driving the ambulance, not everyone makes it, right? And my odds of surviving, I was full stop almost 10 minutes. My odds of being here physically, mentally okay today are less than 1%. So a lot of people die. And he said, when people die, we have a hard job. He said, I got to share with you, don't take it the wrong way, but there's another song we sing called Another One Bites the Dust. He said, what a horrible song. Who would sing that? And he said, well, you got a tough job, and, we just got to soldier forward. We want to save everyone, but, not everyone's going to make it.
I want to take a big step back because you have such a unique Minnesota story. I mean, you talked about working for General Mills. You have a family. You have kids. You worked for Survival Link for as long as you did. And I'm sure you thought about death and dying before you actually did at some point. But before this incident, before your sudden cardiac arrest, what did you think about death? What did you think about dying? How often did you think about death or dying? Or was it something that you didn't always think about before this happened?
Yeah, I didn't always think about. from a family life perspective, right? I grew up in Rochester, Minnesota. My dad's an immigrant from Panama. He didn't know either of his fathers, neither my mom or dad knew either of their fathers. They died when they were pretty young, like 2, 3, 4 years old, kind of thing. But my father immigrated here to the U.S. with his mother to Los Angeles from Panama, native Panamanian, and she lived to be 100. And I had a lot of other family members who've lived a very, very long time. So for me, knock on wood, I've been very blessed to be healthy myself and to have close relatives and family that lived long lives and were healthy. So it wasn't something I thought about a lot, And here's my dad, at the time I had my cardiac arrest, he was 94, almost 95. So I think I operated on the assumption that I was going to be healthy and live this long life like a lot of other family members. I'd been to funerals and, had friends that had tragedies with children dying and that type of thing. So I'd been around it, but I don't think I ever thought about it for me personally. Yeah.
What about how often would you think about what happens when you die? Because I feel like that's something where if you're not really thinking about death all too much, maybe you're not thinking about where you go or what happens.
Yeah.
But what did you believe or think about before this happens about like, when I die, this is what happens next?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in heaven.
Yeah.
I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. I will transparently say my faith over the years has been lumpy. I grew up swimming in the state of Minnesota, and so I'd always be at some small town in Minnesota every weekend swimming, whether it was, Rochester, not a lot of swim meets in Rochester, so I was always traveling somewhere. So whether it was Richfield or Bemidji or wherever it might be, we would find the Catholic Church and go to Mass either Saturday night or Sunday morning. I went to Catholic grade school, so I was raised with a strong belief and faith that, you live a good life, be a good person, live your faith, and heaven awaits. But, it's not guaranteed. You got to earn it through your actions and faith. The lumpy part, I went to college, you have a family, you get out of the practice of going every Sunday. You maybe drift, you get involved in work, and you get involved with kids' sports and activities, and easy to maybe set faith aside for a time period and take it for granted. And I'd certainly done that through periods of my life. Then I'd have periods of my life where I was all in. And it hadn't been consistent, but my belief was always consistent in that there's a heaven and, I want to get there.
Yeah. You talked about the moment where, you are dead, right, for almost 10 minutes, right? And then you also talk about the immediate moments afterwards of having this sense of almost like amnesia, like you can't remember before, during, or after.
Right.
What's that like? So at some point, do you just come to and you're awake and it's like, is it like literally I'm imagining I'm sitting here with all my friends. Next thing I know, I'm in a hospital room.
Yeah. So my first memory, next thing I know, was 3 days later.
Wow.
So I wound up in the emergency room being intubated. I was intubated. I had my cardiac arrest around 6 o'clock in the evening on a Friday. I was intubated overnight. There's a picture, and I often, when I speak, I was at a group of Catholic watchmen earlier this week, and I asked the question, how does God show up in your life? And for me, that Saturday morning, I have a picture. I don't remember this. I'm laying in the hospital bed, not looking my best. And I have one of my sons on each side holding my hands. And I think that was God showing up in my life. I didn't remember it at the time. I didn't know what was happening at the time. I don't think I necessarily even interpreted it that way, only in hindsight. But for 3 days, I had anterograde amnesia, which is common. I shouldn't say common. It happens to people after severe trauma and death. Not always, but it's an occurrence. So I was awake, alert, talking to people, just like you and I are right now, Adam. But I didn't remember a single thing that happened in those first 3 days. So my first memory actually was a good friend I grew up with. We were sort of born together, kind of brother. And his name was Mike. And Mike came into the room, and I knew Mike, he was also a Catholic, but we'd never prayed together. My first memory, he came into the room, sat down next to me, and he said, "Sig, can I pray with you?" I said, "Sure." And he prayed the Our Father with me. That's the first thing I remember after my cardiac arrest after 3 days. A lot happened, and other people filled in the blanks, and it helped me understand what I was doing and what was happening, which are some good stories. But I don't remember anything until that moment 3 days later.
How long did it take for the weight of the moment of what happened to really resonate with you? Because I'm sure it's like, where am I? What's going on? And then you say, okay, this is what's happening. And you're kind of in, I don't want to say panic mode, but you're trying to adjust to a lot of different things at once. What was like the first moment where you were able to really process the weight and the significance of what happened? And what was that like?
Yeah. It's interesting. Having grown up in Rochester, Minnesota, my father was a physician at Mayo Clinic. And so I remember sitting around the dinner table, call this the mid-'70s, back when people had the old carousel slides. Right? So healthcare as a discussion is how I grew up. My dad was a dermatologist. I literally would see people slides, not people's faces, so unidentified, HIPAA thing, but here's a slide of what leprosy looks like.
I was going to say, I'm picturing really gross images.
And these would be shared at the dinner table.
Nice.
So I grew up with the normalcy that healthcare was just, you talked about anything, you processed anything. I had a brother who, he's probably 11 or 12, was on a 10-speed bike and T-boned by a car going 50 miles an hour. Wow. Almost died, spent months in the ICU. Months in a full body cast, went on years later to actually be an Olympic kayaker.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I remember my mother, her vigils at the hospital and all of that. And kind of another funny story relative to, your question of how did I process this? When did I sort of realize and take the gravity of it in? We had some Dutch elm trees growing up in our backyard, probably, again, mid-'70s. So I would have been 11, 12 years old, late 70s. And we hired someone to chop down the Dutch elm trees. And our doorbell rang. They'd been working all morning, taking down the trees, sawing them down. And guy shows up and has his hand wrapped in his T-shirt and says, "I chopped off my finger. I need to go to the emergency room." My mom, what does she say to me? She says, "Sig, why don't you go look for his finger and find it?" So she hands me a cup of ice, and I go out to the elm tree and look around at the wood chips on the ground, find the guy's finger, put it in the cup of ice, and we drive him to the emergency room. So I was in this environment where healthcare things happen, and your attitude has to be solving the problem and positive and moving forward. So that, I think, is part of why I said my crazy phrase, and I know you've read my book, You Are the World's Best, but the real sort of trauma and gravity of it was in the days and weeks and months after.
It took a while.
Yeah.
Because in the moment, you're like, let's put these pieces back together. Yeah. Let's go find the finger, put it in a cup of ice kind of deal.
And for me in the hospital, it was like, I didn't know what was wrong with me because I had that anterograde amnesia. So I would ask the doctor, I'd say to the cardiologist, "Hey, what's wrong with me?" And he'd say, "Well, you had a cardiac arrest."
Yeah.
And I wouldn't remember 10 seconds later.
Yeah.
So I'd say, "Hey, man, I feel great. I want to go home."
Yeah.
Literally. But I knew something was messed up. I just couldn't remember that. Yeah. And after I got my memory back, my attitude was, what do I need to do to go back to living a normal life? And am I going to be able to? But the am I going to be able to, it initially was smaller. Yeah. It was, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
What do I need to do?
Yeah.
But in the weeks and months later, as I'm recovering and the reality is setting in that, hey, I'd go to physical therapy, cardiophysical therapy, and it's like I'm walking 1 mile an hour on the treadmill. It's like, way to go. You're going a mile an hour on the treadmill. Then it was 2 miles an hour on the treadmill.
Man.
And the reassurance was I was wearing, monitored, having an EKG taken while I'm doing that. So it was like, hey, I'm okay, and it didn't happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the book. Obviously, we haven't talked too much about it yet, but Dying to Be the World's Best, it's where you share essentially everything we've been talking about up until this point, your whole story. The one kind of thing that I really liked about reading through the chapters of this point in time is that, like, I feel like it's a classic dad move to, like, you could literally be dying and you're still like, I am in charge. You listen to me. I'm gonna tell you what to do. Like, I like at one point you said you tried to pull out your own intubation tube.
Yeah.
And then you kept telling the doctors again, you're like, I have this allergy. Don't give me this medication.
Yeah.
And like, even in that state where you might not remember anything, you're still like calling the shots. Like, hey, I know what needs to be done here. Just let me help you out. Which is, I think, is such a classic dad move right there, to be in that way. You talk though about getting out of the hospital. Maybe it's weeks later and you have this realization, like, this really just happened.
Yeah.
I came this close to finito, like done for real. When did it begin to register for you, like, this is a real second chance to do things I haven't done yet, to, redefine my purpose for life? And what was the early stages of that like?
Yeah. The early stages was worry and fear that set in. I think a lot of us have been around people that joke, oh man, I did this, that, or the other thing, and it gave me PTSD. And we make light of it.
Yeah.
I learned that's a real thing. And there's actually a clinical definition for it, and it's based on death and trauma, and it can happen to you if you died or had severe trauma, or even if you were a witness to severe trauma and death. PTSD can be a real thing. So I had to figure out, how am I going to deal with this? So I had a choice to curl up into a ball and stop living life and just worry about, is this going to happen again? Is my heart going to stop again? And that wasn't easy. Data was a big part of it for me initially. I talked about the cardiophysical therapy, and it's like, I'm okay. I walked 2 miles an hour, woo. And then it was 3 miles an hour, and then it was on the rowing machine, and then it was back in the pool a little bit. And all of that helped. But it was a gradual process. I reflected back on, again, the God incidences and guardian angel moments. Mm-hmm. And I had been fly fishing. I don't know, Adam, if you're a fly fisherman at all.
Never tried it.
Got to try it. It's one of those things that's super fun. Not for everybody. I've gone maybe half a dozen times in my life. And one of those times was about a month before my cardiac arrest. And at the time, it was just, my son finished his first year med school in Montana, Billings, Montana. So, Montana fly fishing capital of the world. And it was just a fly fishing trip. But as I'm recovering, I'm thinking, is this going to happen again? Mm-hmm. And what can I do about it? And I thought back to the fly fishing trip with my son. It's like, I want to do that again someday, And he'd gotten married, a couple years before. And, I want to be here for my grandkids. And, you think about these things that motivate you. Then I thought back to the fly fishing trip, and he brought his pastor fly fishing with us on the trip. Mm. And my son's an expert. He's like a pro fly fisherman. I'm total rookie, total hack. And he was my Sherpa for the day. And I caught what he called the Montana trifecta, which is kind of fun for any fly fisherman listening. They can follow up with me and let me know if it's a real thing or not. I think he maybe made it up to just make his dad feel good.
Nice.
But the Montana trifecta is a brown trout, rainbow trout, and a cutthroat trout. And I remember asking him as I reflected back, what was I using for a fly? What was the bait that I was using? Because they have all these crazy names, like a Whopper booger or a Chernobyl ant. I don't know why they're named these things, but they are. And I said, what was I using that caught all these things? And he said, well, Dad, you were using the Ray Charles fly, the singer, right? Piano. And I said, why? And he said, well, Dad, even a blind man can catch a fish with that. And that's why we had to use it.
Nice.
But I remember after that, then his pastor saying, hey, guys, have you ever heard of the podcast or read the book 4,000 Weeks? And I said, nope, never heard of it. And I got to be honest, in my brain, I'm thinking, I'm on the river fly fishing. It's beautiful. Is this going to be a sermon? Because I'm enjoying the outdoors in Montana. But I didn't say that out loud. I asked him, I said, nope, what's the book about? And he said, well, it's about purpose in life, and 4,000 weeks is how long you have to live when you're born. It's about 80 years. 80 years. Okay, great, cool. Purpose. In one ear, out the other ear, it was 60 seconds. Yeah. But as I'm recovering, I think that moment was put in my path by God. It was when I reflected on it. I said, okay, my dad is 94, 95. And I don't know if I have a day, a week, a month, maybe I'll be 95. But what if I said I'm going to live my life another 1,000 weeks? I never would have thought about that, hadn't I been? If the pastor hadn't shared the story of 4,000 weeks. I was 59 at that point, and I said, I'll be almost 80, 20 years, 1,000 weeks. I can do a lot. And I'm going to put a stake out there and start acting with some purpose in the long, right? Play the long game, not just about surviving to tomorrow, but I'm going to be here 1,000 weeks and start acting and living that way. And that was part of getting me through the hurdle. And I eventually broke that down to what I call the 5% rule, 5% more. And that concept, you think about it, 20 years, every one of 20 years is 5%. So you've got 20 years, 20 summer trips to the cabin, 20 Christmases, 20 Easters, whatever your jam is, right? Each one is 5% of what you have left, 5% more. And I broke it down further and said 5% of a day. What's 5% of a day? It's about an hour. About an hour. If you don't sleep, it's 72 minutes. You sleep some, call it 42 minutes. But it's about an hour. If you attend church regularly, whatever your faith is, that's a mass, that's a service, at a synagogue, whatever your thing is. They're generally about an hour.
Yeah.
5%. So are you spending 5% on the right stuff? And I asked myself that question. What should I be spending my time on? And what am I convicted of that maybe I need to change?
Your book, you talk about this purpose of encouragement, right? Like part of what you are here to do now is one, to share your story of what happened with other people, but two, to encourage people to be the best they can be, right? Which I think is really awesome. There's a lot of motivation in your book. There's a lot of self-reflection in your book, opportunities for the reader to stop and say, where am I, in my journey? How are things going in my life? But realistically, what do you think your purpose is to be here now? Do you feel like, it wasn't my day on that day almost 2 years ago for a reason? I have a purpose. I have a calling. What is that for you?
Yeah, I do. When I started writing the book and told my kids about it, they were terrified I was going to write an autobiography and that it might include them. It did include them a little bit, but it's not an autobiography. I wrote it with the intent of helping others be the world's best version of themselves, because I believe God created us that way and gave us the power, talent, and capacity to be the world's best. We just often fail for a whole host of reasons. So the goal in my book and when I speak and talk with people is to hopefully share some simple things relative to mindsets and tools that people can implement in their daily lives to be the world's best version of themselves. And, the way that came about was during my recovery, my sister shared with me, and so did some others, that, hey, when you were in the hospital, do you know you said these two things thousands of times to everyone who came in the room? The first you already alluded to, Adam. It was, don't give me this drug. And I had learned that from working at Mayo Clinic years ago in pharmacogenomics, and that's kind of a separate, longer story. But the second thing I said to everyone who came in the room was, you are the world's best. Didn't matter if you were a friend, the doctor, the nurse, the janitor. You came in that room, and I would say you are the world's best probably 50 times in 5 minutes before you'd leave that room. And as I was reflecting on it, you know, I grew up as a swimmer. My career, I was leading corporate teams. And I was the person, you know, a lot of times motivating people, pumping people up. Let's elevate our performance and do our best. I had never said that phrase before in my life, but I kind of had that DNA. So as I'm thinking about why did I say this crazy phrase, as I learned in the weeks and months after, it was a simple way of expressing gratitude. I call that vitamin G now. I wanted to get some vitamin G injected into that room, right? Everyone wants to hear, you know, you're great, you're fantastic, I appreciate you. I just chose the words, you are the world's best, to say thanks. And by doing that, you really elevate people's performance. You develop a connection. And I knew I needed the world's best doctor, the world's best nurse, the world's best Sig, if I was going to be okay. Even though I didn't know I had a cardiac arrest those first 3 days, I knew something was messed up, and I needed to be my best and everyone else to be their best. So that was the genesis of it, was the vitamin G, but then also just elevating performance and being our best every day.
You talked a little bit before about the percentage recovery chances, but have you made a full recovery at this point? Are you back to where you were before you're...
Good question. We all get older, right? And we get older and we don't generally get in better shape, but yes. So I would say before, you know, I'd play pickleball 3, 4, 5 days a week, couple hours a shot. I'm back to doing that now. Wow. Which is great. I don't have limitations in life. So in theory, I can do everything, you know, kind of a fun story. And I have not gone back to this yet, but I'd like to. When the Medtronic rep came in and told me I was going to get an implantable cardio defibrillator, I asked him a whole bunch of technical questions based on my work at Survival Link. But after the technical questions, I said, am I ever going to be able to scuba dive again? And he looked at me like I was nuts. And I said, I've been on over 1,000 dives all around the world. After you put in this, you know, my wave maker, this implantable cardio defibrillator, can I dive again? He said, I don't know. Let me check. Came back later that day and said, I checked and it's contraindicated. I think the lawyers had gotten to him. And, you know, it's contraindicated because if you're underwater and your heart stops and this shocks you, you're probably going to inhale water into your lungs and die. I wasn't concerned about that. I can deal with that risk, right? My heart could stop again tomorrow. Great. I get it. It's not a pleasant thought, but I was concerned with the pressure underwater. Will it crush it like a tin can and make it not function, or can it survive the atmospheric pressure of a dive? And he said, well, we've tested it, and it can go up to 100 feet. So I haven't gone scuba diving again. I'm planning a trip this next winter to go snorkeling in the Baja Peninsula area with whale sharks.
Nice.
And I can kind of stay on top of the water, maybe go down, 10, 15, 20 feet. But I don't know if it's a mental thing. But
Wow. One thing in your book you talked about, and you talked about it a little bit, is that before this happened, your faith was something that, even if it was up and down, it was private to you. But your faith now is, I mean, you showed me you've got a second book here that is just come out, From Pause to Purpose, and that is faith-driven all the way.
Yeah.
Where are you at right now with your faith?
Yeah, I'm all in. When I talk to people, I talk about heart-stopping moments. And we all have heart-stopping moments. They don't have to literally be your heart stopping and a ride in an ambulance like mine. And some are good and some are bad, right? Could be the death of a child. Could be taking out a mortgage on your first home. Birth of your first child. But those are moments that cause us to pause, rethink, reevaluate priorities in life and ask maybe why are we here? And that's what happened to me, and recommitted myself to my faith. And I believe practicing faith in the good times, the bad times, the ugly times is super important. And oftentimes, it's easy to practice our faith when things are tough and we want to look to God for help. But I think it's that consistency of practicing it during the good times too, and sharing it with others that's important. And it's really become a cornerstone for me. One of the things I did, and I don't talk about this that often, I don't know why, but to get myself on track to go back to Mass regularly, I said, you know what, I need a regular Mass partner. And so I made a list of about 50 people in my church that I could call up and say, hey, what are you doing this Sunday? Could I go to church with you and your family? And I started doing that. And it was interesting. I sort of learned, well, maybe these people don't go to church every Sunday, because I'd call them up. They'd say, well, nice idea. We're going to be out of town, or we're not going. And other people I'd call and say, well, we're going to be out of town, but love to go with you next Sunday. And I found people that would go to Mass with me.
Nice.
So there's small intentional things that we do. It's not a big, giant leap, but it's those small intentional things we can build into our life, that 5% more. You know, my speaking these days, I talk at corporations from the business perspective, right? I had a 30-year career, a lot of great companies here in the Twin Cities and Minnesota. But I also talk to faith-based groups. I've spoken to a lot of Lutheran churches, Catholic churches, other Christian faiths, but it's not limited to that. You know, I try and make my message more universal. What's interesting is guardian angels, I've learned, are a concept that goes across faiths. Yeah. So Judaism, Islam, there's just different versions of this idea of guardian angels being present. So while I talk about the corporate thing, I also talk about the faith thing. And then the third track I talk about is AED advocacy, right? And CPR advocacy, and how can we help more people survive and thrive with cardiac events in our communities. And so really and those overlap and intertwine, you know, some, but for me personally, my faith is part of all of those. And it was interesting. I was speaking to a faith group at a church a couple months ago, and afterwards someone came up to me and said, hey, I'd love to have you at my company talk. And my message, I spoke for 45 minutes, was faith-driven for 45 minutes. I was at a church men's group. And he said, you know, love your message, love your story. Can you tone down the faith and come into my company and talk about it? Yeah. And I get it. I spent 30 plus years in the corporate world. And I said, well, the story is the same. And this idea of God's presence in my life is part of that. Yeah. But the takeaways and the core messaging, yeah, you know, we can talk about sales performance in that context, right? We can talk about mergers and acquisitions in that context. And so I've done a lot of that too. And so even that, it's not devoid of faith. It's just not led with faith. It's interesting when I talk with some of the church groups I speak with now, I start by saying, hey, I am not a theologian. I haven't read the Bible my whole life. I'm not going to quote Bible verses. I'm a common man who's had a journey, and faith is part of that. And so, you know, there are speakers out there and people that help organizations that start with, you know, I have a PhD in faith and, you know, all of that. And that's not me. I try and bring a very just real personal take on it that, you know, you ask me about this part of the Bible and want to quote it, great. A lot of people can do that. I'll listen and learn, and I'm reading more. And hopefully through that, I'm reaching people that maybe are on the margins of practicing their faith, you know, that were like me, lumpy, you know, they were raised with the faith, but, you know, you go in and out of it and practice less. And so I think that's where I can fit well, is sort of crossing those bridges.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, thanks.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is super personal, but there's not a lot of people who've been through what you've been through. I mean, they're a handful maybe.
Yeah.
But you have heard, I'm sure, from some people who have had that experience where, you know, they're clinically dead, right?
Yep.
And then they come back and they talk about, like, I had this vision of heaven, and I saw Jesus, and all of my loved ones who have passed were in the room with me, you know, and from what you shared, it's you didn't have that.
No.
Did that take a while to try and process? Like, why didn't I? Or is it just like, hey, I understand why I didn't? And then the second part is like, what do you think it's going to be like when you do go to heaven at some point?
Yeah. I didn't have that experience. I get asked that almost every time I speak. And there's people that's the core of what they do, is research near-death experiences out of body when people died and came back. What did they see? What did they feel? And I look at it pretty simply and say, I had this anterograde amnesia thing for 3 days. I may have had that. I may have had something happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Wow.
But maybe something did. I hope I was going the right direction.
Yeah.
if it did. And I'm going to, you know, work to live the rest of my life to hopefully make sure I go in the right direction. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on here a second.
Heaven. What do you think it is going to be like?
Yeah. I think it's going to be fantastic. I think I'm hopefully going to see a lot of people I've loved in my life there and reconnect with them and eternally be happy and at peace.
Sig, you are a motivator. You are an author. People can find your book, Dying to Be the World's Best. Where can they find it?
On Amazon and a couple of local small bookstores, one out in Hamel, Art to Heart, which is a faith-based store carrying my book, a couple other small ones around town, but largely through Amazon. And I'm proud to say, and I don't know, Adam, you probably don't know this, but I've beaten, you know, I was a Division I All-American swimmer.
Yeah.
I've actually beaten Michael Phelps. Well, this is the catch. And I'm about 20 years older than Michael Phelps, right? So maybe I swam against him when I was 5.
Yeah.
Not the case. So when I published my book, I was #1 bestseller in 2 categories. It was #1 bestseller in faith leadership.
Yeah.
Cool. Very proud of that. Didn't expect that when I wrote it. And then there's a category called swimming. And my book was #1 in the swimming category.
Let's go.
Michael Phelps was #9, but in fairness to him, I think he'd published his book 10 years before, and it was still in the top 10.
That's awesome. And then you've got 2 more books that you brought. You want to talk about those really quick, where people can find them, what they are?
Yeah. So my second book I wrote is called From Pause to Purpose, Moments That Move the Heart. And they're all on Amazon. That book, I didn't realize Google had been saving all the photos I ever took prior to my cardiac arrest digitally. So I had, you know, nice digital camera starting about 2000. And as part of my recovery, you know, I'm organizing things and memories, because guess what? If your photos are just sitting in Google or on a hard drive or in a scrapbook, they don't serve anyone, right? They should be shared. They should be shared. So now Google serves up memories to me, you know, right? That's kind of a new thing, at least for me in the last year or two.
Yeah.
And every time I get a memory, I share that. I put it in, convert to video and share it with the people that are in the photos.
Yeah.
So otherwise it's just me.
Yeah.
Okay, great, fine. So anyways, I realized Google had saved all these awesome photos, and I put them in a coffee table book. It's a reflection book with Bible verses. You can pick it up, open it to a page, and it has all original photography, crazy things that I shot over the years that I didn't know why I was taking the photo necessarily, other than, hey, there's an ant in my driveway carrying an entire peanut. And I took a photo of that. And now I have a 2-page spread called Ant Size Miracles.
Wow.
And talk about how, we can overcome big things, like this little ant carrying a peanut. My second book, my third book, I have to give credit to my father. Mm-hmm. So that's called Ba and the Humbug Tree. And my father wrote the text for this book probably about 15 years ago when my mother was still alive. And then it sat, never published it. And my mom, I remember her daily, weekly, she'd say to my dad, he was a physician at the Mayo, have you published your book? You got to publish your book. She died 3 years ago, and he hadn't published his book. So I said to him as I was writing my first book, I said, Dad, I almost just died. You're 95. We got to publish this before you die. You never did it for Mom, but let's get her done. So I helped him publish it. It's a children's book targeted at, say, a newborn you're reading to if you're reading on your own, a first, second grade level book. So that was really a lot of fun to do that.
Super fun. Well, you said online people can find those 3 books. Sig, it's awesome to have you in and hear your story. Thank you for making time for us this morning and for sharing just what you have.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. You are the world's best. Really appreciate how you have this podcast and share belief and faith with people as part of that.
I was hoping you'd say it at least once.
Clip that.
Thank you, Sig. Hey, thanks so much again for listening to Bigger Than Belief for this episode with Sig. As always, we share real stories about real faith held by real people every single week. And I'm really excited to share about some of the next Thursday episodes we've got coming up here as we head into August and then into the fall. It's crazy to think we've been doing this for over half a year now. It was like, let's just get the first episode out to start. And now we're, before we know it, going to be at that 1 year mark. Thank you again. I can't say it enough to everyone who takes the time to listen to these episodes. We put a lot of work and care into every one of them to just share these stories in a way that's authentic, real, heartfelt, and just true to how these people would want their stories to be shared. So again, if that's you that's listening, thank you so much. As always, we'll be right back here next Thursday as we head into the month of August with another brand new episode. You're not going to want to miss it. In the meantime, folks, be well, take care of yourself, stay cool if you're here in Minnesota, and we will see you all very, very soon.